Himes. He's a Democrat from Connecticut who serves on the House Financial Services Committee and previously worked for Goldman Sachs in their telecom technology group. And Congressman Himes is represents Connecticut, was just reelected, by the way, to his third term. Thank you so much, Congressman, for joining us on this. And certainly you've got a great background here when it comes to dealing with the math and dealing with the fiscal cliff and the budget negotiations. First off, are you in full support of the president's stance that any deal is going to have to mean an increase on taxes on the wealthy?
Well, look, there's no question that when we get this done, the grand bargain is going to involve sacrifices on the part of everybody, and it's going to involve everybody coming to the table and giving something up. And so, yes, are the very wealthiest people in this country going to be exempted from the idea that they, too, are going to participate in that? Of course they're not. And by the way, that's not just the president's position. More and more that has become the position of many Republicans.
It has. However, the debate really is over. We're talking about deductions or we're talking about tax rate increases. So let me clarify. Are you in full support, with the president that there has to be tax rate increases on the wealthy, the top 2%?
No, I don't necessarily agree with that point of view. And look, arguing about tax rates versus deductions is arguing about the mechanics. The underlying principle is right, which is that the people who are most fortunate in this country are going to be part of helping find us a solution. However, look, 9 out of 10 economists will tell you that the smart way to reform the tax code is actually to simplify it, to keep rates as low as possible while eliminating as many credits and deductions and whatnot as you can. And by the way, you can do that. I mean, so much of the tax code, of course, favors those people with very, very high income, whether it's, the capital gains treatment of carried interest or whether it's, deducting $1 million mortgage or whatnot. Right. You can actually achieve the same thing by simplifying the code and keeping rates as low as you can.
Okay, so it sounds as if you're for raising revenue or tax revenue in other ways than, Congressman. Give me some specifics on the sort of tax changes that you would support in order to appease the Republicans who are looking for some drastic entitlement cuts.
Yeah, sure. So I just named a couple. Again, our tax code is riddled with things that provide a benefit to people who really don't need a benefit. The mortgage interest tax deduction is, of course, one of these third rails of American politics. But what about when you consider the fact that you can get a deduction for $1 million mortgage? Who in this country has $1 million mortgage? It's not your, working family that has $1 million mortgage. That's an idea, right? How about the fact that
so let me just stop you there. So you would say eliminate the mortgage deduction for houses worth more than $1 million, let's say?
No, the proposal that I supported, which is the Simpson-Bowles proposal, says you can lower the cap on the deductibility of mortgage. Another thing that would bring in a lot of money, of course, is the fact that we tax work, our income, our ordinary income, at much higher rates than we tax capital gains and interest and dividends, right? Okay. I personally think we ought to think about converging those rates, right? Most economists, again, will tell you that that it makes sense to have a simpler set of rates where income is taxed at the same rate regardless of the nature of that income. There is, by the way, not a ton of evidence out there to support the proposition that when you tax interest and dividends and capital gains at a lower rate that you see a lot more investment. So again, some combination of these things is, I think, a better way of getting more revenue than simply hiking the rates.
Well, that's an interesting point. And let me bring your background from having been on Wall Street and in business. When capital gains rates were at higher levels, when dividend income rates were at higher levels, did you see much of a difference?
Well, again, there's just not much evidence out there that having dramatically lower rates for the return on investment, that it actually creates a whole lot more investment. And look, I mean, most Americans understand that there's something fundamentally wrong.
But Congressman, would you have said that when you were on Wall Street?
Well, where I sit and where I work doesn't necessarily determine how I think about what most economists say is true or not true. Look, the reality, and just let's set aside the economists for a second. Most Americans understand that if you go out there and through the work of your 9-to-5 job, invent a cure for cancer, you're going to be taxed at 35%, whereas if you collect dividends, you're taxed at 15%. Mm-hmm. There's just something a little wrong with that picture.
Well, for many Americans, it seems very wrong and it seems very unfair. But Connecticut Congressman Jim Himes, thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining me, a member of the House Financial Services Committee. Now, it is the season for the biggest money.